I've got a couple videos I'm getting ready to do. I'm getting ready to sand a box store unfinished cabinet to put in the laundry room. But I first wanted to talk about sandpaper. So the first one I'm going to mention, and this was what you would consider sandpaper in your mind's eye if you were thinking about it. This is what we call a P60. And this one does say on the back, sometimes they say, sometimes they don't, but the packages usually do tell you what they're for. Rapid removal of wood, rust, and paint. So this one is your proverbial sandpaper. Very, very, very scratchy, very rough. Hurts the hands. And you could probably tell that surface, right? So today I would not use this on what I'm working on. And I can explain a little bit more because I don't want something that rough on this piece of furniture. And if I was working on an antique, I also would not use this. But if you have a piece of something and it's got 12 layers of paint, you could use this, right? But if you're using a soft wood, this could scratch. If you've only got 1 or 2 layers down and you want to be careful. But a P60 is really good. I did a ladder project and I used a 60 on the ladder. It had 30 layers of paint and it was a wood ladder that used to be used as a ladder, and then I made it decorative, and so I did use this. The next one I want to show you guys is a P100. Not quite as scratchy as the 60. This is the 60, right? The tan. When you rub it, it doesn't feel near as tough or harsh on your fingers. I would use this one on like a dresser that only had a few layers of paint and that you were just wanting to kind of get smooth. Like I said, I've used the 60 and I've used it for a lot of things, but it just depends. It's so important to do your homework if you're not sure, or to reach out and ask questions to people that have. I've done bar stools, a table, a china hutch, bookshelves. I've done a lot of different things, and so it just depends on what I'm working on. 100 and 150 are my favorites. Again, if you flip it over, if they get all out of a box, out of order, if you flip it over, it'll tell you P100, and so that is the 100. The next I'm going to show you is a 150. And again, if you flip this over, it'll say 150 on the back. A lot finer. The grit changes. You're going to see the word grit when you talk about sandpaper. It's a finer grit. When you rub it, it's softer. It doesn't make that horrible sound that the 60 and the 100 do. So we're getting a little bit finer. This would be more of a finishing piece of sandpaper that I'm getting it ready to do a dresser, and I'll probably use these two on the dresser. I won't use the 60 on the dresser. It's an antique dresser. I'll do a video on that. And again, if your son or daughter or kid, husband, whoever gets out in your garage or whatever, and they mess with your sandpaper, you can turn around and look on the back usually. Now, 220. This one tells you what kind of sandpaper it is in case you need to know. This is definitely more of a finishing piece. Let me get really close. Still just a little rough. This is definitely a little rougher, right? But this is a 220. I will use the 150 and the 220 on the dresser that I'm going to work on. The next up is a 320. Almost paper-like, almost no grit. You'll see that word again, grit. And you'll see that, and this is definitely what we call a finishing piece. On the unfinished cabinets that I'm getting ready to do, I'm going to do a 220 and a 320 because I don't need to rough them up per se. I just need to make them soft And even when you work with an unfinished piece of furniture, sometimes the natural oils of that wood, once it's cut, will come to the surface, and you just got to get that off there. I'll do a video on that later. So I actually plan to use these two, the 220 and the 320 today. I'm going to start with the 220. I may go down to the 150. I'll see when I get going. And I'll do a video on that, and I'll explain to you guys what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. But 320 is almost very smooth, almost paper-like, not quite, and it's what we call a very good finishing paper. So there's those. You can buy a box, and this box actually has 60 grit, 100 grit, 150 grit, and 220 grit. The only thing I can tell you guys is don't buy too cheap of a paper. I made the mistake of buying some cheap paper, and I buy full sheets sometimes. I bought some full sheets of the 320, the very fine. This is a full sheet. This is what we call a quarter sheet. And I'll do a video on how to load my sander. But I did buy full sheets of the 320. It's cheaper sometimes to buy the full sheet and then just cut it the way you need it, and I'll do a video on that. There's other ones as well. This brand here, this is a very, this is a pack again that has different brands in it. It has a very coarse. So this is what we call a medium, which I would consider more like a 100. This one's more like a 60. It's very, very, very sandpaper-like. And then they have a fine, which I would say this one to me resembles my 150 almost exactly. So there's just different ones out there. Do your homework. Figure out which ones you like. I do tend to like the name brand, who aren't sponsored by this video, but I do like the Gator brand, sold at Lowe's. My favorite is 3M products, but they hold up. They last longer. That's the problem. You buy a cheap sandpaper, and it doesn't, you have to change that paper more often. You're not saving any money because you're going to go through 2 times as much. So you buy a cheap paper, you might use more. The nice part about buying the packs is you can have almost everything you need. Now this is just a box of 150. Because when I've done the other projects, I've started with 150s. And so I have noticed that I'm running low, however, on the very fine. So tomorrow when I run out, I'll pick up some more. But I just wanted to talk about sandpaper, why I like what I like, you know, the different packages you can buy. And you'll just have to try out what you like, see which one works, which one doesn't. This is not a sponsored video of any sort. This is just my personal opinion. And I'll put all these up together. And kind of give you an idea. Let me turn these around for you. So the grit on this is really, really rough. Sort of rough. Starting to get smooth. Smooth, very smooth. Right? 320, 220, 150, 100, 60. They do make different ones. And it just depends on what you're using. I am using a quarter sheet sander, and I'll show you how to load that here on a different video. But I'm going to start off using, probably honestly, my 220. And I'm going to do a video on that. But I just wanted to talk quickly, woman to woman, or man to man, or woman to man, whatever, about sandpaper. Don't be afraid to do your homework, reach out, ask for help. I have been doing furniture for like 10 years on and off, so I had to learn sometimes the hard way. I did have some help along the way. My problem with some men, no offense men if you're out there and you're watching my video, I love you, thank you for watching. Sometimes they just don't think you know what you're doing, or that you need help, and then they take over, and then or they talk down to you, and I'm just not into that. So I'm lucky enough to have a husband who doesn't mind helping and doing different things. So I'm going to jump off here, guys. This is going to 10 minutes now. Have a wonderful day. I hope this helps explain about grit. You'll start on a low number depending on what you're working on and go to a higher number to make it smooth. Just don't go too hard, too harsh, depending on what you're doing. So, because we don't want you to ruin the piece that you're working on. Hit like, hit subscribe. Another video coming. Have a wonderful day, guys. And share. Thank you.